Welcome back to your daily read aloud, My Side of the Mountain. We're getting close to 2/3 of our way through the book, okay? And the last thing we saw his very nice deerskin outfit, right? So he got his first deer and made a door. Then he got a couple other deer. He made a blanket. He made some pants, some shoes. What did he make out of the last deer he just got? Cadence? Yeah. The shirt thing? Well, the underwear he used, I think, rabbit fur for those, didn't he? So he finally has his, he calls it, I think, a tunic. Okay, it's just like a big shirt. He's got pouches all over it. Why are the pouches super helpful? Noah? Yeah, he doesn't have bags and things, so he has to have somewhere to put stuff. All right, so that was the last chapter, and he's feeling very handsome in his new outfit, he says. All right, next chapter is called Trouble Begins. All right. I stood in my doorway that 23rd of November, dressed from head to toe in deerskins. I was lined with rabbit fur. I had mittens and a squirrel-lined pair of moccasins. I was quite excited by my wardrobe. I whistled, and Frightful came to my fist. She eyed me with her silky black eyes and pecked at my suit. Frightful, I said, this is not food. This is my new suit. Please don't eat it. She peeped softly, flapped her feathers, and looked gently toward the meadow. You are beautiful too, Frightful, I said, and I touched the slate-gray feathers of her back. Very gently, I stroked the jet-black ones that came down from her eyes. Those beautiful marks gave her such a superb dignity. Oh, that's our vocab word, right? What does dignity mean? Josiah? Yeah, you're proper, you're acting calm and respectful. So he says she looks dignified. I lost my spot. Oh, in a sense, she had also come into a new suit. Her plumage had changed during the autumn, and she was breathtaking. I walked to the spring and we looked in. I saw us quite clearly, as there was no longer any frogs to plop in the water and break the mirror with circles and ripples. Frightful, I said as I turned and twisted and looked. We would be quite handsome if it were not for my hair. I need another haircut. I did the best job I was able to do with a penknife. All right, raise your hand if you think that probably didn't go super well. Okay, a penknife is a very small knife, kind of like a pocket knife. I don't know that I could cut my hair very well with a penknife. It'd be hard. I made a mental note to make a hat to cover the stray ends. Then I did something which took me by surprise. I smelled the clean air of November, turned once more to see how the back of my suit looked, and walked down the mountain. I stepped over the stream on the stones. I walked to the road. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was on my way to town. As I walked down the road, I kept pretending I was going to the library, but it was Sunday, and I knew the library was closed. I tethered Frightful just outside town on a stump. I didn't want to attract any attention. Why would it attract attention if he took Frightful with him to town? Hayden?
Because no people really have any of those like.
If you saw a boy in a deerskin suit with a bad haircut walking through town with a falcon on his arm, would that cause you to take a lot of looks at him?
No.
If I saw a kid like that walking through town, I would stop and look for a while, right? And I'd wonder what's going on, and that's not what he wants. What would be the problem if people started paying him too much attention? Noah? Oh. Does he know if he's been reported missing? Does he get newspapers?
No.
Is there radio broadcasts up on the mountain?
No.
Okay, so he doesn't have any idea. So he's got to play it really safe. So he tethered Frightful just outside town on a stump. I didn't want to attract any attention. Kicking stones as I went and whistling, I walked to the main intersection of town as if I came every Sunday. I saw the drugstore and began walking faster. So that would be like a Walgreens back then. By the time I got to the drugstore, I was running. I slipped in and went to the magazine stand. I picked up a comic book and began to read. So why do you think you went to town? What do you think? Pretend you're Sam. You've been on that mountain for a long time. Why would you want to just go to town, maybe? Hayden, what do you think? He's lonely. You guys, thumbs up if you agree with that. You think he's getting lonely? So I think it'd be fun to live on my own, but like I've said, after enough time in the woods by yourself, it gets very lonely. So, I wonder what he's going to do. Noah? Uh-huh. That'd be lonely, right? Some people do live like that, way out in the woods, but it would be tough. So he's beginning to read a comic book. Footsteps came toward me. Below the bottom pictures, I saw a pair of pants and saddle shoes. One shoe went tap, tap. The feet did a kind of hop step, and I watched them walk to the other side of me. Tap, tap, tap again. A hop step, and the shoes and pants circled me. Then came the voice. Well, if it isn't Daniel Boone. Does anyone know who Daniel Boone is? Josiah?
He's like a person who likes to
Yeah, a long time ago. I have the Who Was Daniel Boone book if anyone's curious. He was one of those wilderness explorer guys. So he looked like Sam, the way he was dressed. So that's why this kid's like, Daniel Boone, look at you. I looked into the face, about the age of my own, but a little more puppyish, I thought. It had the same coloring, brown eyes, brown hair, a bigger nose than mine, and more ears, but a very assured face. I said, well, I grinned because it had been a long time since I had seen a young man my age. The young man didn't answer. He simply took my sleeve between his fingers and examined it closely. Did you chew it yourself? He asked. I looked at the spot he was examining and said, well, no, I pounded it on a rock there, but I did have to chew a bit around the neck. It stuck me. We looked at each other then. I wanted to say something, but didn't know where to begin. He picked at my sleeve again. My kid brother has one that looks more real than that thing. What do you got that on for anyway? I looked at his clothes. He had on a nice pair of gray slacks, a white shirt opened at the neck, and a leather jacket. As I looked at these things, I found my voice. Well, I'd rip anything like you to have on all to... I messed that all up. Well, I'd rip anything like you have on all to pieces in about a week. He didn't answer. He walked around me again. Where did you say you came from? I didn't say, but I come from a farm up that way. What'd you say your name was? Well, you called me Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone, eh? He walked around me once more, then peered at me. You're from New York. I can tell the accent. He leaned against the cosmetic counter. Come on now, tell me. Is this what the kids are wearing in New York now? Is this gang stuff? I am hardly a member of a gang, I said. Are you? Out here? Nah, we bowl. The conversation went to bowling for a while, then he looked at his watch. I gotta go. You sure are a sight, Boone. What'd you doing anyway, playing cowboys and Indians? Come on up to the Gribley farm and I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm doing research. Who knows when we're all going to be blown to bits and need to know how to smoke venison. Gee, you New York guys can sure double talk. What does that mean? Burn a block down? No, it means smoke venison, I said. I took a piece out of my pocket and gave it to him. He smelled it and handed it back. Man, he said, what do? Eat it? I sure do, I answered. I don't know whether to send you home to play with my kid brother or call the cops. He shrugged his shoulders and repeated that he had to go. As he left, he called back. The Gribley farm? Yes, come on up if you can find it. I browsed through the magazines until the clerk got anxious to sell me something, and then I wandered out. Most of the people were in church. I wandered around the town and back to the road. It was nice to see people again. At the outskirts of town, a little boy came bursting out of a house with his shoes off, and his mother came bursting out after him. I caught the little fellow by the arm, and I held him until his mother picked him up and took him back. As she went up the steps, she stopped and looked at me. She stepped toward the door, and then walked back a few steps and looked at me again. I began to feel conspicuous, and took the road to my mountain. I passed the little old strawberry lady's house. I almost went in, and then something told me to go home. I found Frightful, untied her, stroked her creamy feathers, and spoke to her. Frightful, I made a friend today. Do you think that is what I had in mind all this time? The bird whispered. I was feeling sad as we kicked up the leaves and started home through the forest. On the other hand, I was glad I had met Mr. Jacket, as I called him. I never asked his name. I had liked him, although we hadn't even had a fight. All the best friends I had, I always fought. Then got to like them after the wounds healed. The afternoon darkened. The nuthatches that had been clinking around the trees were silent. The chickadees had vanished. A single crow called from the edge of the road. There were no insects singing. There were no catbirds or orioles or vireos or robins. Frightful, I said. It is winter. It is winter, and I have forgotten to do a terribly important task. All right, let's see if we can figure this out. He's got the clothes he needs. He can make a fire. He has food to eat. What has he maybe missed? Cadence? All right. Any other ideas? Alex? Well, he just made a jacket. Might not be crazy warm, but he's got one. Angie? He's got frightful. What do you need to make a fire burn? Hudson?
Wood.
Does it take quite a bit of wood to keep a fire going? If you had to have a fire in your house all winter long, would you need a big pile? Yes. Okay. When I grew up, my house had a chimney fireplace in my basement. And is your house like this? It's connected to your house to heat it?
Not in my basement, but it's in my fireplace, and we have, it's like one that burns all the bad gas, cleans it up, like better gas.
Uh-huh.
It's very expensive, but everyone else in my neighborhood only has that.
Gotcha.
We're the only people in my neighborhood that have electricity.
Okay, so the one I had, it helped heat my whole house. Now this is the problem with that. Okay, some of you are not listening the way I like you to. I know you know what to do. Excuse me. At my house, we would have to go put fire in this fireplace, and it doesn't burn all night. Okay, so if you go to bed, let's say my dad went to bed at 11 at night, we needed our house warm all night, right? So he would have to set his alarm every couple hours, go to the basement, put more wood in the fire, kind of blow on it, move it around, do all that stuff. So it takes a lot of wood. So where do you think he's going to find all this wood? Where's he going to put it? Hayden?
In his house?
I don't know. Let's find out. Lost my spot. Oh, frightful, I said. It is winter. It is winter, and I have forgotten to do a terribly important thing. Stack up a big wood pile. The stupidity of this sent Mr. Jacket right out of my mind, and I bolted down the valley to my mountain. Frightful flapped to keep her balance. As I crossed the stones to my mountain trail, I said to that bird, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll make it to spring." All right, so that is the end of that chapter. The next one's called I Pile Up Wood and Go On with Winter. So we'll save that for tomorrow. But, friends at home and classmates here, we are going to read one chapter out of our Beatles book each day. As we're learning about them in reading class, in our textbook, we'll read this book. So, who were the Beatles? Here's our cover picture for you guys. Okay, this will be an AR book you can take a quiz on. I think most of these are usually 2 points. Okay? Hayden?
They're famous singers, rock band.
We know that, right? They're a famous rock band. We know who the 4 members are. We've read about them in the story. They're pretty funny. But we don't know much about them. Okay? So, here we go.
Well, we know those
Who were the Beatles? Chapter 1. They were known as the Fab Four. And they were so famous that if you just said John, Paul, George, and Ringo, people knew who you were talking about. They looked different from most young guys in the early 1960s. They wore their hair longer. Reporters called them the mop tops. Okay, you guys remember their hair hangs down low, kind of like a mop on their head. So back in this time, men kept their hair short, and they looked very different. Their clothes were different too. They wore collarless suit jackets, which buttoned all the way to the top. Their accents were different too, because they were all from England, Liverpool, England. Before that, all the biggest pop stars were American. Most of all, their music sounded different. It was rock and roll, but not like anything kids had heard before. When the band came to the United States for the first time, concert stadiums sold out. People went wild. Girls fainted. Newspapers called it the British invasion. They were even bigger than Elvis. Then, when they were at their most popular, the Fab Four broke up. Yet, more than 40 years later, their songs are still huge hits. In November 2010, it was front page news when all 13 of their studio albums became available on iTunes. Who was this band? The Beatles, the greatest rock group ever. Okay, now before I read on, the author just stated something. Was it a fact or an opinion? We raise our hands. Liam? They were the greatest rock group ever? It's kind of hard to tell, right? What do you guys think? Angie, is that an opinion or a fact? Okay, she says fact. Eric, what do you think? Opinion. Madeline, what do you think? Abby? Noah? Okay. So would that be different, though? We could say the Beatles sold more concert tickets than any other band. Can you think of anyone in the world that might not think the Beatles are great? Do you think those people exist? Yeah. Okay, I think I already told you about my grandma. She didn't really like any new music, and she would snap all my mom's records when she was a girl. Break them in half. Yep. So, some people didn't like the Beatles. Most people did. So, can we safely say that's the author's opinion? No, but we are in the first chapter. We're going to go through all the details now, okay? So that is an opinion, but sometimes opinions almost seem like a fact. Noah? All right, we're going to do one more chapter, and this one is all about John Lennon, okay? So listen carefully. John Lennon is the one who was assassinated. All right. He was the one that was murdered. All right, there was nothing quiet about John Lennon, not even the day he was born. It was October 9th, 1940. World War II was raging in Europe. Liverpool, England, was being bombed by the Germans. But baby John couldn't wait. His mother, Julia, went to the hospital and gave birth at 7 in the morning. As he arrived, the walls of the hospital shook from falling bombs. So that's a little different, right? Even before the war, Liverpool was a gloomy place to live. Once a thriving seaport, the rain-soaked city had become run down. Many factories were closing, and those that remained open didn't have enough jobs. Poor families were crammed into small apartments in the slums of town. At first, John lived with his mother and his grandparents. John's father, Alfred, was never around. He worked on a ship and was gone for months on end. So that'd be tough, right? If your dad was gone that much. As hard as she tried, John's mother couldn't make enough money to support her baby son. For a little over a year, Alfred sent checks home. Then the checks stopped, and Alfred stopped writing. Julia couldn't even afford to get John his own bed. He ended up sleeping in hers. Things got worse. John's family began to fight over where he should live. Julia wanted him to stay with her. He was her son. But she had trouble taking care of him. John's aunt, Mimi, also wanted the boy. She said that John would be better off with her. Mimi lived in a big house in a better part of town. John's father tried to take him too. One weekend, John went to visit his father, whose boat had docked in Liverpool. Alfred asked the boy, only 5 years old, if he wanted to go on an adventure. They would travel together to a faraway country called New Zealand. Sure, John said. It sounded like fun. When Julia found out what Alfred was planning, she told him to stay away. But much as she wanted John, Julia saw that her son needed a better home. In the end, she decided to send him to Mimi. Okay, so that's his aunt's house. Despite all of this, John was a happy boy. Pictures from those days show him with a big smile on his face, whether he was riding his bike or standing with the family dog. The family dog, Sally. So his dog's name was Sally. Mimi gave him lots of books. Along with reading, John liked to make monsters and skeletons out of paper and paste them over his bed. Because John was so young, he didn't really know that it was unusual to live with his aunt and have his mother visit. Besides, Julia acted more like a buddy than a mother. She loved to tell jokes, make funny faces, and sing. She taught John how to play the banjo, an instrument similar to a guitar. From Julia, John heard stories about his banjo-playing grandfather, who had moved to the United States. It was John's mother who gave him his first guitar. She also taught him how to play it. But Aunt Mimi had lots of rules. She expected John to come home after school to do homework. She wanted him to go to bed early. She often had a good reason to get mad at John. As he got older, John got into more trouble. He was smart, but he didn't work hard. He did well only in art class. John spent most of his time making little books of poems and drawings. He also got into fights with other kids. And he sometimes made fun of his teachers, even when they were right there in the room. Perhaps he was acting up out of sadness. A few months before his 18th birthday, Julia was hit by a car and died. So that was his mom, right? John was heartbroken. Years later, he wrote the song Julia about her. As a teenager, the one thing John got serious about was music. When he was 15, he heard rock and roll for the first time. Until then, most music heard on the radio was soft music, sung by such stars of the day as Perry Como and Doris Day. Rock was different. The music was loud. It had a strong beat, you could jump around to it, and many grown-ups hated it. Teenagers loved it. Rock had exciting stars. John's favorite singer was Elvis Presley. Elvis was from Tupelo, Mississippi. He had thick black hair, which he slicked up with grease. He wore his shirt unbuttoned so his bare chest would show. His jeans were very tight. And when Elvis sang, he swiveled his hips. Girls went crazy. Boys admired him. But many adults thought he was a bad influence. When Elvis went on television, he was only shown from the waist up. That way, nobody could see him dancing. Hayden?
Well, Elvis Presley was kind of the
Yeah, great. She just said Elvis Presley inspired John Lennon, okay? Before Elvis Presley, there was really no rock and roll. So, he listened to Elvis. Do you think that made him start thinking of different type of music he could make? Yeah? Madeline? Just because at that time it was like improper. Everybody acted way, almost like there was more respect back then. And people just didn't want things to change. So they didn't want anyone to see him dance because they didn't want everybody to start dancing. All right, now this little page is all about Elvis, okay? I know a lot of you don't know much about him. So, Elvis Presley. Born in Mississippi, Elvis Presley was the first real rock star. He was a white singer who captured the sound of African-American blues musicians. So his inspiration were people like Louis Armstrong, people that played jazz. Remember our jazz unit when we learned about the singers in the book? So he was inspired by them. He just made it more rock and roll soundy. Yes? It is, but there's like a little page here just with info about Elvis, since they mention him. All right. There were other white singers who did this too, but Elvis was the most exciting. Elvis recorded his first song in 1953, My Happiness. He paid for it himself as a gift to his mother. For a while, he worked in a machine shop and drove a truck. Eventually, he was discovered. His hits included Hound Dog and Heartbreak Hotel. As he became more popular, people stopped calling Elvis by his real name. Instead, he became the king of rock and roll. All right. So, John started dressing like Elvis, right down to the greasy hair. He also decided to play guitar. Mimi didn't approve. Are we surprised? No. She wanted John to take piano or violin lessons and wouldn't pay for guitar lessons. But John kept on playing guitar anyway. He was a natural. Soon, John formed his own band at school. It was called the Quarrymen. Still, Mimi wouldn't let him in the house with his new instrument. John had to practice outside in the garden. A guitar's all right, Mimi told him, but you'll never earn your living by it. Do you think she had to kind of eat those words after the fact? Did he make a lot of money from that guitar? Yes, he was one of the richest people of his time. All right? So we will stop there. So we've got 3 more chapters just about each member as they grew up, okay? So John Lennon, he grew up in not a great situation. Who did he go live with when he was a little boy? Liam? Aunt Mimi. And what happened to his mom? Angie. And what happened to his dad? Noah? Kind of left him, didn't he? Yeah, he was supporting him. He worked on a ship. But after a while, he stopped sending checks home, stopped writing, kind of abandoned his family. So, could we say John Lennon had kind of a tough childhood? Yeah. Even though he went and lived with his fancy aunt in a big house, does that make all your problems disappear? No. So, we will come back tomorrow and we're going to read about Paul McCartney, okay? I will see you guys at home later. Have a wonderful day.